Hey beloveds, welcome to this episode of the Living Consciously podcast. My name is Yvette Ratshikhopha, known as Yvette Alu on social media. Today, my guest is a really amazing woman who I've been following for some time because of her work around conscious parenting. If you know me, you know that I am for the kids. You know that I want them to be treated with love, gentleness, and considered to be human beings just like everybody else. And that's exactly what I cover today with the mummy feminist, or also known as Gao Phala on social media. And we talk everything conscious parenting, healing your inner child so that you can parent better, and showing up as your true and authentic self rather than mostly your wounded self, and most importantly, having grace. So do check it out and watch it till the end, and remember to subscribe and follow wherever you're watching or listening to this. I am with a really amazing guest. I've seen her journey on social media, and the work that she does just around children and raising them, from a conscious parenting perspective. Her name is Gao, or Gao Phala, and on social media she's known as Mummy Feminist. So I'm quite excited. Welcome, Gao. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm excited. I love these kinds of conversations.
I love your honesty. I'm so glad to have you here because we've been following each other for some time on social media, and I've seen some of the honesty that you have. I think you have a blog. I don't know if you still have it. I've read some of the articles. I've been following you and just your journey and how you raise your kids, right? So that's the main reason why I wanted to have you here, because I'm a big fan of just treating children with kindness and love, and which just speaks into gentle parenting or conscious parenting. So tell me about you, how did you get to this place, and why is your handle Mummy Feminist? How did that come about?
I'll start here and go back. So in 2020, during the hard lockdown, I professionally am a journalist. So I was doing stories, but things kind of died down. And a friend of mine said to me, "Friend, have you ever seen these mommy bloggers on Instagram?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do follow some of them." I remember the time I was following two mommy bloggers, and she's like, "I think that's something you should do." And I was like, "Really?" Okay. Because I used to post a lot on my own personal Facebook about my journey with my son. And she said, "Just share." And I realized, actually, this is not just sharing, it's actually a brand. And if I was a brand, what would I be? Okay. If I'm sharing about my kids. That's a good question. Yeah, I had to ask myself, do I call myself with my name? But I noticed that people have their own niches and all of that. And I said, you know what? A big part of my parenting has to do with my feminist journey. Okay. So why not call myself Feminist Mommy? But then it didn't go well on the internet because there were already feminist mommies. You know how Instagram chooses a username for you. And I ended up being Mommy Feminist, which I really like. And really, it's just a journey of combining my ideals and values that I aspire to as a feminist with my parenting. I think feminism has so much inspiration and it contributes so much to how I parent my kids.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought, because your page is just all about, I think one thing is that a lot of people have negativity associated with the word feminist, so when they hear that, they kind of take a step back, so it's lovely to hear that you've combined the two, or, you've taken those values from that. So what is feminism to you?
So feminism for me is just a radical view that women are people and human beings. And I think it was the journey of when I had my son. I was 22 years old. I was in university. I had just finished graduating, but I still had more to do. And I was a full-on Christian then. And I had a difficulty connecting to the Christian life and being a mother. I think for the first time, I saw how difficult it is to be a mom in this society. I had to ask myself, what does it mean to be a mother socially? And what I found out was that to be a mother socially, according to society, is to put yourself last. It's to put other people first, and to actually strip yourself of your humanity just because you have the ability to produce children. And I was not happy with that. It was there's always this expectation this is a mom, so she should be able to give up everything for her children, including her happiness, including her core self. And I reject that notion. And that's why I always say I have a love and hate relationship with motherhood, not in its technical sense, but it's in the societal view of what being a mother is. And that journey of being a mom, and a single mom for that matter, and being a woman, it showed me so much about womanhood and the struggles that we women face. I knew that women are treated unfairly, but when I became a mom, it became very apparent. I mean, from people finding out that my child was a boy and emphasizing that, like, it's so important. What if I was pregnant with a girl?
Just even from the womb, how differently the energy is, the excitement, it's like one of those videos where I think there was a video that went viral about a dad that found out, at birth, that the child is a female, and then walked out of like the birth room, so it's things like that where you realize that from birth, the perceived value of maybe women and girls, to boys is already different, and I can imagine how, being in that process as well, the realization, the awakening as well, and also just being a young mom. I think is it okay to say 22 is a young mom? I think just being a young mom. Also, you spoke about Christianity, and I know that sometimes that does come with people having assumptions, judgments, and a lot of young moms find themselves having a lot of shame. What I do like about what you just said is that I reject that notion. I feel like that's like a lovely affirmation to be like, I'm not subscribing to that. I reject that notion and really defining that for yourself. So tell me more about, so mommy feminist, and now you have birthed your son, and there are these, attitudes around that. So how did you then build yourself up into defining what motherhood is for yourself?
Yeah, it was a very difficult journey because motherhood comes with a lot of societal expectations, but expectations of yourself. I think the first thing I had to admit was I don't know how to be a mother. And because I also my mother didn't raise me, I have a different story. Most people will say their dads weren't there, which I acknowledge and I think is valid. But I have a different story. My mom rejected me. And that was a difficult thing to process for me because a lot of times we are told that a mother's love is bigger than anything. It's almost like the dad is just there. He's needed. He must be there financially mostly. But a mother's love is... And I always wondered to myself, why didn't I have it? If it's such a beautiful thing, what does it look like? That was the first thing. It was to say, I don't know how to do this. And how I tapped into my feminism is at the same time, these radical notions of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a human being and women being regarded as human beings came into play as well. And then I had to ask myself a question because I was parenting how I was parented. So children should be seen but not heard. So I had to ask myself a lot of questions in my journey. And one of the biggest questions was, if I am fighting to be recognized as a human being and to be seen as a human being, what about my children? If I am sitting or I'm standing and protesting and saying women matter, no means no, and I go home and I see my children but I don't hear them, I don't acknowledge their presence as full human beings who are developing, because we tend to treat children as half
human
people.
Beings. Yeah.
So as full human beings who are developing, who need not equality but equity. How do I do that? So a feminism challenged me to say, you cannot be standing for human rights but not the humanity of your kids. You cannot go out there protest. It's hypocritical. You can't come home and shout at your kids and not hear their feelings and not journey with them on their developing journey, but go out there and say, no means no, women are people, stop the violence, stop this. And that challenged me to see my kids as human and to also look at the fact that the relationship between children and parents should be connection over authority. And most of the time we value authority over that connection.
Sure. There's so much that you've said that is, I can relate to, because obviously, like with my work, I work with a lot of adults who want children. Like if people parented, in a better way, I wouldn't have clients, but because a lot of people are raised from that, it's my authority over your feelings. It's, you can be seen but not heard. It's, suppress a little bit of yourself to make me happy. It's, so a lot of people grow up with all of those standards, and then we will look at our society, why people struggle with so many things, especially when it comes to their mental health, and we're like, why is this way? It starts at the parenting, it starts at, how children are raised. One thing that I remember as well in my journey was, I used to be anti-child abuse, right? And then I realized I'm like, no, because it came with a lot of anger, and a lot of like energy that wasn't serving me, because I'd be angry, just because I don't like her. I'm that person that when I see somebody hitting a kid, I'm like, imagine I walked up to you and did that. How would you feel? There is no space in life where it's acceptable to hit a person except when it's a child. You know, there's no any other time when an adult does that to another adult, it's defined as abuse. But when it's children, somehow people kind of like bypass that, and that's where that humanity is just lost. It's like it's a child. You know, it's not a human being. So I remember I decided I'm not going to be against abuse. I am for teaching children like they're humans, fully human, just like what you said. So I really love that, and I also love the link between it's seeing women as fully human, and it's seeing other people as fully human, regardless of anything. So I really like that. So tell me about now. You've realized, you've come to this awareness about, that children are human, and they have rights just like you. They get to use their nose, and their yeses and all of that. How did you come across the term conscious parenting, and what was changing from those ideals that you grew up with? What did that journey from changing from those ideals to how you parent now?
Yeah. So I used to hit my child when he was much younger. Between 1, 2, because I didn't know any other way. We parent the way we were parented. I didn't have any other tools. And I remember at the time I was also a single mom, and I was in a very dark place because I felt cheated. I felt alone, like we made this baby together. Why are you abandoning me? So I had also a lot of anger. My family not being supportive of me. So I didn't realize that I was taking all that out on my child. There was a time in my life where I resented my child. I felt like you are here and I can't do the things I want to do with my life. My career has been cut short. Now I have to take care of you. And I was going through that, and I remember the one day.
That's the blog post that I read, actually.
Yeah. I remember the one day I hit him. And I talk about this because I want parents to know that I'm not a perfect parent. I've done mistakes, and I still do make mistakes today. And I hit my kid so hard that even my hand hurt. And I remember that night I knew that wasn't right, because I also come from abuse. I also come from being beaten and not heard. And the next day I tried to play with my child, and every time I would call his name, he would get frightened. And I remember thinking, he's afraid of you. Is this the kind of parent you want to be? Sure. I remember my kid was afraid of me, and it didn't sit well with me. And I just went on Google and I said, do I hate my child? And I put a question mark. And all of these results came out, and it was blogs of other parents talking about conscious parenting. There's gentle parenting, which I like, but I love the term conscious more, because it's really about being intentional with your parenting. You can be gentle without intention. And that's how I found out.
I like that. Wait, gentle without intention, because there are parents sometimes they think gentle parenting, it's like it's just about softness, but it's not. It may miss. I know I don't like the word.
Because there are times you need to be firm.
You need to be stern. You need to be assertive. Yeah. Children need structure. They need, there's certain things that they just need. So you can be like gentle, and then the kids are like. I remember, I don't know what I was watching, and someone was like, I wish I'd say to my parents, do something like, like apply some sort of, give me advice. Guide me. It can't just be I'm floating here. I need guidance. So that's something that's also. I love what you've just said. It's about conscious parenting is about intentionality as well, and just being mindful about the way that you parent and show
Ask yourself, for me, conscious parenting is about, the reason I like to use it is because I always want to remind myself. I want that label attached to me so that it can keep me accountable. And what that means is, if I make a decision, I need to ask myself, who does it serve? Me, the child, society, abantu bazothini, or what? That's the question every parent should always ask themselves. And when you start asking yourself that question more often, at some point you don't need to ask it anymore. It's subconscious. You have to sit back and reflect and say, okay, we have this decision in the house. Why did I make it? What does it serve and who does it serve? And take your children into your confidence and say, this is why I made this decision. And people feel like they shouldn't explain themselves to children, but actually we should, because not only it must be scary to be a child. You don't make decisions for yourself. Everything happens around you without your consent, without your opinion, without your view, whether your parents are moving or doing this or that. It must be really scary. When you take your children in your confidence, not only do you teach them to do the same in how to communicate with other people.
They model that.
Yeah, you model it, but you also affirm them and remind them that they are safe in your hands. And that's very important. So the journey has been asking myself, what are my feminist values? And how do those translate to my children? And I'll just make one example. One of the values that every feminist should hold, and I hope they hold, is power sharing. The reason why the world has the problems it has is because so many people hold on to a big amount of power and they don't want to share it, and they make decisions that are not good for other people. And for me, I've had to ask myself, if I want power sharing in the broader society, what does power sharing mean in my home? And what does it mean for my children, child appropriately, based on age? It means including them in decisions like, what's for dinner? It may seem like something small, but it teaches your child to be decisive. It also affirms them that their opinion about what they want to eat matters, right? And power sharing is a powerful one, because one of the things that parents don't understand is that the conflicts they have with their children, most of them are based on power struggles, because children are human like us. We all want autonomy. We are built to want autonomy. So when your children fight with you about, I want that, or I want to wear that, and you don't want to, or you want to go there, they don't want to go there, it's really about their autonomy. So you need to choose your battles, obviously, but choose which parts of your life you're going to give them power, and which parts you're going to say, I can't decide. We can't have you choose this part. Mommy loves you, and mommy's going to make the decision for this part. I'll let you choose that, but here... So you just juggle it.
And I think even with what you just said now, power sharing doesn't mean, it means that they have a voice, right? But even when, let's say, the decision is something that's best for them, but they don't feel good about it, like a change of schools because maybe finances have changed in the family, a change of location, a change of different things, right? It doesn't mean that, you silence them. It means that saying, this is the decision, like explaining the decision as well beforehand so they can understand, because I remember one of the things that I said to an acquaintance or a friend of mine is that, she was going through a life shift. And like every shift that you're going through, your child is going through. Right? Yeah. And that she had like a 4-year-old at the time. Every shift that your child is going through, your child is going through. If you're going through a divorce, they're going through a divorce. If you're moving, they're moving. And if it's stressful for you, right? And the difference is they can't voice it. You have friends. You have maybe relationships that you can talk about. You may probably even go to therapy, but nobody speaks to the child. Then when they express their pain, right, they throw the tantrums, right? Then people, and I say tantrums in inverted commas, then that's them communicating because they don't have that language. And then they get beaten, they get labeled, they get pushed away. And I'm like, imagine being the small person with all these emotions that you cannot express, and then you get shunned even further for it. So I like that even if it's a decision that they might not like, you can still acknowledge their emotions and say, I hear what you're saying. I understand it, and it's valid. I understand that moving is difficult. I understand that this shift is difficult. And that's also the part of conscious parenting that I like, So you've Googled, and now you found the term, and you kind of found what the values are around it. If somebody were to start conscious parenting, what are some helpful tips that you would give them in that journey? The things that you've now have figured out. What are some 5 core bases of conscious parenting?
Yeah, I love that question, but at the same time, it's one of the questions I get asked a lot. Okay. And the reason I have an interesting answer for it is because most parents just want solutions, right? They want you to give them, here are 10 things you need to do. It starts with a mindset shift, because conscious parenting looks different for different families. What I do in my home may not be what another parent does in their home, but they're still being conscious as a parent. So I always say, if in your mind you haven't resolved or unlearned rather the idea that children are not human, or they shouldn't be seen, or the opinions that don't matter, no matter how many tips I give you, they're going to stay in your active mind, but your subconscious mind is still going to continue doing the same things, and you're going to feel like you're not achieving anything. So it really starts with unlearning. And for me, what really worked with unlearning was reading. I need to remember, there's a book I really recommend. It's called The Conscious Parent by Dr. Shefali Tsabari. She is a psychologist. Yeah. I think it's a very amazing book to read. And if unlearning is difficult, I found that what makes unlearning difficult is also the environment and the space you're in. And it's very hard to be a conscious parenting in a society where maybe family and close friends will look down on you. I mean, people called me soft. People said, oh my gosh, really? What are you doing? And it can be very discouraging. So find people like-minded who are in the same journey. My page has so many women and mothers and fathers, funny enough, who are on this journey, and they feel they're supporting each other. I'm very happy with them becoming friends and having their own little, because when you're unlearning, you need that help. And unlearning requires you to have an accountability partner. Get yourself an accountability partner, someone who knows what journey you're in, someone who believes in your journey and wants you to go into their journey, someone you can bounce off. I'll make an example. I have a friend who's also on social media, and sometimes when it's difficult, like there was a day I had to call her. I was like, I'm going to say this because we think this stuff. I'm like, I want to wipe the floor with my child's face because what the hell? And I had that person who was like, I get those feelings and let's breathe. Yeah. Let's talk about the problem because you need it. We don't think we need it. One of the other things that I really trained myself to do is when your child does something that triggers you, because they do trigger us. And the reason they trigger us is because if we did that when we were young, we would be slapped right away. So when your child triggers you, try to take a step back and count or remove yourself from the situation. Even if they're breaking something, let them break it and move away. Calm down, because we usually respond in anger. Come back. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. Another thing, prioritize listening to your kids and spending time with them. It makes resolving conflict much easier because they trust you, they know you better, and say sorry. Show them you're human. Show them that you make mistakes. When I mess up, I go to my son and I say, buddy, I'm really, really sorry, but I fumbled this morning. I did this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I really made a bad decision, and I know it's going to affect you badly, and I'm really sorry. And that type of thing shows your child that you have integrity and you're honest. It's very hard for a lot of parents to apologize to their kids, but it's very important.
It's also validating that the behavior is not okay. If you don't hear sorry, you're like, oh, that was okay, and my feelings don't matter. So when you grow older and somebody maybe does the same thing, like if someone shouts at you when you're older and you had parents that shouted at you, you're like, oh, this is normal. Like nothing in your mind most of the time says, oh, this is abnormal behavior. I shouldn't have to stay for this. But when a parent comes and rectifies behavior, I think children also understand that the behavior wasn't okay. So it's also just very, very validating for them. I like a lot of what you've said, change the mindset and unlearn, and also learn to regulate your emotions. I'm always say, I don't know if you see it by posts too, but just saying things like, like learn to regulate your emotions. Like children are not responsible for the fact that you cannot manage your emotions. A lot of parents are actually very anxious and they are not aware. So they'll get home and it's like the kids must hide so that you can feel okay. You can have your peace. But it's normal for a 2-year-old to, and this is also part of the unlearning. It's normal for a 2-year-old to play with that Vaseline and put it all over their body because they're learning how to do things, right? In every other area of life, when children are learning to walk, for example, we celebrate them, right? When they're learning to talk and they mumble and it's cute. But when it gets to certain ages and it makes us uncomfortable, then we're like, this is bad. And this is why I also always say, go and learn about the different developmental stages. Why do toddlers throw things around? They're learning, what their hands can do, what their feet can do. Sensory, I forgot what they call it. Sensory something, they're learning how to pour things into a cup, so they're not going to get it right all the time, things like that. Those are normal. So I think what you're saying about unlearning is quite important. Getting the resources, getting the support, having a supportive community around you. So those are really, really important points in terms of, and also you can't give what you don't know yourself, right? So that's where the resources and the unlearning comes in, because if you don't have a replacement behavior, if you don't have something that will say, okay, this is how else you can approach it, I know there's some of those questions like when kids are going to bed and you say, do you want to bath first, or do you want to go, do you want to eat first? And they're like, I want to eat first, which apparently doesn't work as they get older. But apparently like even stuff like that, just giving them autonomy and learning, okay, there are ways to get, children to do things. And a lot of times they actually, they're quite cooperative, it just takes some patience, and a lot of unlearning, like what you just said. Tell me about, you mentioned a lot, that some of the journey is very triggering, right? tell me about the things that you had to unlearn, and how has conscious parenting helped you heal your inner child?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I was also going to say that in conscious parenting, we think a lot of the work is for the child and is about the child, but it's actually more about you. It's a mirror into your face. It's a mirror to you. So I think my story, sometimes I feel like it's black and white, but it's actually quite complex. I experienced a lot of abandonment as a child, a lot of rejection, and you can imagine how that feels like for a child, right? And I also experienced a lot of verbal, physical abuse. And, you know, a lot of the times I thought I'm okay. But then I grew up and had children, and I realized you're not fine.
I'm not okay.
Yeah, you're not okay. And I think conscious parenting is like reparenting yourself, and it's forced me to visit those areas of my life that I just put behind me and closed up. They're still there, but I just closed them up. My anger issues, my impatience. Why am I impatient? Why do I need things to be rushed? And why don't I plan for that process, you know? And I had to ask myself those kind of questions and revisit, to a point where I ended up having to see a psychologist. So a lot of parents will find that they're struggling, and it's okay to struggle with conscious parenting. It's because it's difficult. The status quo is that we traditional parent. It's my way or the highway, or go feed yourself. Right? Yeah. It's my way. Who are you? This is my house.
And also that thing of, when it's children, it's never seen as financial abuse, because obviously you're the authority, you're the one paying the bills. So it's like, I can treat you however I want because I'm the one that pays the bills. I feed you. I have control over that. Therefore, you must. Yeah. Continue.
So I've had to revisit a lot of my own past, a lot of my own childhood, and it's led me to feeling like there was a point where I felt like, because I was so overwhelmed by my own childhood and the pain that I experienced, and revisiting all of that in a more aware way, because I used to hide it. I got to a point where I was like, why am I a mom? I don't want to do this. I was so scared. I felt like I was incapable. But I think with the right support, and obviously I know that access to mental health facilities and mental health and wellness is difficult, but I think there's a lot on the internet. There's a lot of us. That's why I really value mom bloggers and mom sharers, and because I feel like there's a whole lot of us who are just changing the narrative and visiting our inner children. And I think I heal through how I heal my children, but I like to not make myself the center of the whole thing as well at the same time. And I think a lot of times my older child especially calls me to order.
It's always the firstborn. It's always the firstborn.
Because the firstborns go through a lot. So yeah, it's been a very humbling journey. It continues to be. I have a friend who's also a conscious parenting blogger, and I love what she likes to say. She makes it so simple. She says, you need to remember that nobody's an authority on parenting. You are figuring it out with your child. And when we act like we are the authority in all of it, we really mess up our kids. I think a lot of your viewers and listeners will relate to really coming to an age where they realized, oh, my parents are not perfect people. It feels like a culture shock or something. It's like, what, you have some sort of like, what? I remember my time when I realized my dad makes mistakes. What? And I think what conscious parenting allows for me to do is to communicate to my kids that I'm human too, because when we conscious traditionally, and it's my way or the highway, we also dehumanize ourselves. We also teach our kids that we also aren't human. We're perfect people. We don't make mistakes. But our kids need to know we're human so that they can accept their own mistakes and accept who they are themselves. And the journey has really been great, not easy. There are times where I feel like my children are being super difficult and I don't have the data bundles or the time to be conscious and to be gentle.
I mean, it's the same with relationships. It's the same with everything. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, it's easy to be like, oh, I want relationship, I want this, you know, or to find yourself and then realize that even then we trigger each other. You know, there's things that surface and you have to learn, you know, all those things like connection before correction.
Yeah.
You know, that, you know, you can't just disappear because you feel these uncomfortable, you know, emotions. You have to stick around. You have to still treat the person with love and kindness. And with kids, I think even more so, because they're really looking towards adults, you know, for that love, you know. And I think one of the things that you mentioned when you spoke about, we need to give ourselves, you know, it's grace, you know, because so many people lack grace for themselves, and that's why they're so hard on their children. And the more as adults, you know, the more more adults learn to give themselves grace, the easier it is for them to give it to their children. The more they're patient with self, the easier it is to be patient with children. The more you unlearn those things, And another question, it's like, where did I learn this? That's a crucial question to ask if you're on the conscious parenting journey, and is this the only way to do this? Is this one of the things that we do in African culture is force feed children, and then it's like, then you learn that actually children know their stomachs. Most of the time they know when they're full and they don't need to eat that much. Sometimes it's because of our own traumas, if we come from a difficult background and then you're like, I don't want them to starve. And then now you're overfeeding them because of your own fears or a lot of things. Sometimes people overspoil their kids because of their own fears and all of it, So I think it's also just like acknowledging, where did you learn this? Is it serving the relationship? Is it serving your highest intention? What's the highest intention? To create or to raise children that are aware of themselves, that love themselves, and that treat themselves with love and kindness and are able to journey through life, and have the skills to journey through life. So I really love everything, but I think one thing that stood out is grace, grace for self and grace for children especially. What are some things that you have had to forgive yourself for?
Yeah. I've had to forgive myself for having, firstly, a child when I wasn't ready and making that decision and take accountability for it. And I guess almost every day or every other week, I'm forgiving myself for something. And conscious parenting has made it so much easier. It's not to say that it's licensed to harm your kids, but it's sort of a license to sort of forgive yourself, because we're so hard on ourselves, like you say, as parents. And I've had to forgive myself for beating my child. I think when I became more aware of what I was doing, I was so angry. And the fact that he remembers can make it very hard. So we revisited a lot. And I've realized that actually, Gao, this is your journey with your child. You can't erase it. You're not a perfect parent. And if he wants to continue going back to that memory, because maybe that's how he's healing from it, because he would sometimes just remember that, Mom, you remember that time when you... And it's a sore one for me, because every time we go back, I'm like, I wish I could wipe away this memory. But then when I was pregnant with him, there's a song I listened to, I forgot the title, but it describes a journey, and it's really about, sometimes you will walk through my mistakes as a parent. Sometimes you will walk through your mistakes. And I'm realizing that I'm not going to be able to save you from everything, but what I can save you from, I will. And I think when I look back at those lyrics, I'm always encouraged that you're doing better. So when we do our mom check-ins and kid check-ins, like what were you happy with this week? What were you not happy with? It gets easier and easier to do those sessions because I get used to them and the criticism. So yeah, I think it's a journey, and I forgive myself all the time. It's just that one incident that he remembers that I also think I need to continue to revisit and forgive myself for it.
That's interesting. I guess sometimes if the emotions are still there, then it will resurface, but at least getting that validation and all of that is something that, that he needs probably continuously, and it creates probably safety for him as well. And thank you also for your honesty and vulnerability so far. I think you're so honest even on your social media. One of the things that I do love is those meals that you make for your kids, and then you put the affirmations inside the snacks. I think that's so mindful and so thoughtful and so intentional. How did that even come about?
Yeah. So I saw some mothers doing it online, and I didn't think it's something I would do. But in terms of lunch boxes, it's also healing for me. So I never had that.
The nurturing element.
Yeah, I never had that. And me and my brother used to have to figure out, food was there, but we had to figure out how we go about our meals at school. And, as I journeyed with my son, he was a picky eater, and it was difficult to make him food. I remember at some point I was crying because the nurses kept telling me that he's not gaining the right weight. So that was a very hard journey, and I took that part and I said, you're going to put every effort that you can to express your love for this child by figuring out what he wants to eat and how he wants to eat it. And this is going to be your affirmation for him. And that's really where the journey started. And then when I started making lunch boxes, I got excited excited. I have friends who ask me, why do you buy such an expensive lunchbox? I'm like, because I save up for it. It's part of my journey. Because I can afford it, I guess. At first it seemed ridiculous. Like, oh my gosh, this lunchbox is 500 rand. Like, why am I doing this?
Those are some quality looking lunchboxes.
But then the value it has, it keeps food fresh. And it's about that intentionality of thinking about, I'm not saying every parent must buy a 500 rand lunchbox. I mean, I think for my journey, it's about the freshness it keeps to, because I have a picky eater. If the freshness goes away, all that food is going to come back. So I put a lot of effort. And the notes, when I started them, I did the first one and he came back and he had written me a reply. And that's when I thought, oh my gosh, so he likes this. And it's been our journey since. I don't do them every day because people ask me, like, do you actually put notes every day? I'm like, no, some Fridays I actually give him money. Like, he doesn't want lunchbox.
And your affirmations.
Yeah. Sometimes I give him money. And the other day he was telling me, can I please buy him a little plastic so he can save them so that when he's older, he can go back to those notes and read them again. Sometimes they get messed up with the food. So I'm thinking of also getting something to wrap them in so that they don't get food, because they're so precious to him. And another thing that happened with those notes was he struggles with reading. So it became a challenge for him to find out what I wrote. So I wrote something very simple. Where he gets the help doesn't matter. And it turned out he always goes to his teacher to help him read the note. And he's always very thankful, and he'll just come back and say, oh, mommy, thank you so much. I love you too. And I think school can be such a scary place. Imagine just sitting and having a bad day at school, or he had a bad morning, and you go to your lunchbox and you open it and there's a note from mommy just to remind you that she's there.
Like, can you write me lunchboxes? Like, I think adults need lunchboxes too. Wow. I think it's just like, from what I'm hearing you say is like, parenting is a call to love.
Yes.
That's what it is, to love to the best of your ability. And love looks like understanding, like what you said about your son struggling to eat, and not saying, people usually go to the child and say, oh, what's wrong with this child? Not, how can I make this child's life better? How can I seek to understand them so that, I can serve them better, I can love them better. What would love do in this situation? So I think parenting sounds like a call to love, and I can hear the love, in how you talk about your children, all the inner work you've done to get to the place where you can give them the nurturing that maybe you also didn't even receive, in certain aspects. And also a call to love yourself, before we kind of end of this conversation, I'm wondering, what would you say to your inner child? Yeah. What are some of the things that you needed to hear? We just spoke about affirmations that you put in your lunchbox for your son. What would you say, like, if you could meet you and face your inner child right now, what would you say to her?
I love that you asked me this, because I recently had to write a letter to my young self, and I was terrified. And I was terrified because the way I view my younger me, but it also reflects that that's how I view myself, as a broken, that child that doesn't want to get adopted. That's how I looked at myself. And I think after writing the letter, crying through it all out, I said to her, and I continue to say to her, you're all right. You're going to be okay. It's not your fault. None of it is your fault. And I would repeat what I tell my kids every day. You're beautiful, you're important, you matter, you're loved. And most importantly, you love you, yourself. And just sorry. Just sorry.
Oh, that is a beautiful note. I've also done that exercise. I remember once I did it on an Ig Live, and I was crying. I'm like, why am I crying? I've done this before. But
I forgot the one thing, the most important thing, you're capable. Yeah, you're capable.
Sure. You're capable, you matter, and it was not your fault. Yeah. I think that's so important as well, because we blame ourselves so much for everything that we've been through, and we ask ourselves that what's wrong with me question instead of what happened to me. And I'm really grateful for you being here today and for sharing your journey so honestly, for being so vulnerable, and also for the work that you do online, right? What would you say to somebody who is on they're parenting a certain way right now, and they're realizing maybe that they need to shift things, right? What would you say to that person if they're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast right now?
Yeah, I would say, especially as a parent, your gut feeling is never wrong. if ever you feel like something is not okay, don't just wrap it up under the carpet and leave. We have a culture of putting things and hiding them under the rug. The work is out there, but you're not alone. You don't have to do it alone. I provide a safe space for parents to be themselves. Parents think when they come to me and say, I was shouting that I'm going to judge them. There's no judgment. You don't know any better. Nobody has taught you any better, but there is better. And you can do this. You got this. Nobody knows your child like you do. You are an expert at your child. Doctors know about your child's body and whatever. Psychologists about the mind. You know your child's soul and spirit more than anyone in this world, and you're capable of changing that.
Do you think children choose their parents?
I think children have no choice. The reason I like to use the words, I like to say to my son, thank you for choosing me. And for me, that's because he chooses me every day, not at the start, not at pregnancy. I think that's just a consequence of whatever. But I think the choice every day of being able to forgive me, being able to look beyond my mistakes, being able to relationship with me. My kid likes me. And I think that's kind of cool. They like you. Yeah. So I think for me, it's about relationship. If we can thank our partners or our parents or our sisters and brothers for choosing us every single day, I'm sure we can teach our kids to do the same thing. And trust me, children will choose you, because who else will they choose? And they love unconditionally. Learn from them. Let them teach you. I also hate this idea that children are a clean slate. They're not. They are a beating spirit. You just have to help them uncover that beating spirit and its essence. And that's what you're there for.
And not beat the spirit out of them.
Yes.
You know,
they are a beating spirit. Don't beat it out.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's very affirming for any parent that would be listening to this, you know, and also just like the same way that you would choose your partner, you know, you appreciate them and you thank them for choosing you. You can thank your children and definitely learn from them, because they know how to do life. They know how to process their emotions. They know how to use their voice most of the time. They know how to create. They know how to have fun. They know how. They just need guidance. Yes. That's it. You
Absolutely.
know, they need guidance. And most of us come here knowing what we're here to do, you know, and usually we're guided out of it, you know. So thank you for sharing that and for all those beautiful tips. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram as mummy_feminist and Twitter. On Facebook, I'm Feminist Mummy. Okay. My blog exists, but it's under construction. Okay. I need to make it better. So it should look good soon. And I'm going to be sharing more. Yeah, so I'm on social media. I have an email account. You'll find it on social media. If you want to chat, if you want to email me something, come through. Let's talk. There's no judgment here.
I like that. There is no judgment there. Thank you so much for coming today. I honor you. I honor your journey. I honor your light and just your beauty, man. I think there's something that's so beautiful about honesty in being self, regardless of where you are. And I hope you continue to just shine your light, you know, whatever that looks like. And I'm so grateful for your energy. And I'm sure everybody that joined us today is super grateful to learn from you. So thank you for joining today. And also thank you guys for joining us today for this conversation. Remember to please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And yeah, I think just stay conscious, stay mindful. And if you're a parent, I really hope that you take a lot from this and start to implement it. And I think have grace for yourself. That's the biggest thing. Have a lot of grace for yourself. Thank you for joining.